Bienvenue, benvenuti, and welcome to Expatriotical, the podcast for expats, travelers, and other adventurous souls. I'm Chandra Ali, and after living as an expat with my husband and 4 children in 2 different countries for 7 years, I've learned the arts of pivoting during pitfalls, traveling tastefully for less, and soaking in amazing new cultures without losing your own. Join me as we dive into the joys and challenges of travel and the expat life in every episode. Hey guys, so we are in the first full week of October right now, and as we really settle into the beginning of the school year for those of us that have children, and just to general busyness for everyone and the beginning of fall festivities, or I can say autumn festivities because I have learned that most people don't say fall, it's mainly Americans. But also after my recent trip to look at schools in Singapore, fall kind of feels like a relative term. Yes, of course, there are still the months of September, October, and November in Southeast Asia, but it doesn't feel or really feel like that crisp weather that I grew up with in Colorado and what I experience now here in Paris. I will say, though, that I was very pleasantly surprised with the weather when I arrived because I had been preparing myself that I would be absolutely miserable. Not because I was trying to be negative. I know that sounds negative, but I had been told how extremely hot and humid it is there. So I was really gearing up for it being rough and hard to tolerate. But I was so pleasantly surprised when we stepped out of the airport doors to hail a cab, and I thought, well, this feels fine. But then I also thought, well, I wasn't in the sun. I was under a covered area. So maybe I just haven't felt that intensity yet. But when the taxi driver dropped us off at our hotel and I stepped out into the sunshine, I thought again, I can do this. This is doable. Yes, it's humid. Yes, it's quite warm. It was about 31 or 32 degrees Celsius while we were there, which for my American listeners is between 87 and 89 degrees. But the beautiful thing is that everywhere inside is air conditioned. In fact, I had to keep a jacket with me all of the time because I was cold inside. And then I would remove my jacket as soon as I stepped outside. But Singapore as a whole was gorgeous. It is clean. I even told some friends who know me well as being a bit of a germaphobe, which is something I've mentioned here on Expatriotical before, that if I was really tired of waiting for somebody in like a metro station, I would have had no problem just sitting on the ground and waiting for them, which is something I would never do in Paris, Milan, or even London or New York. I've been on the subway there. And I shared the metro as an example because the cleanliness does not stop there. It's on the streets and sidewalks and in shopping malls, which there are an absolute abundance of, as Singaporeans really like their shopping malls. And just everywhere, really. That's probably because it's very illegal to litter in Singapore, as Singapore is nicknamed the fine city, not only because it is a fine city to live in, but because you can get fined for lots of things. And speaking of the transportation, it was so incredibly easy to use. That's probably because everything is always in English. It's one of their main languages. So when riding the metro, you would hear an announcement about minding the gap or watching the step in English, then in Mandarin, then in Malay, and then I think the other language was Hindi. And the fact that everything was in English was not the only reason it was so easy. It was that I didn't have to get a transportation card. Not that those aren't available, you can buy them, but you can use your credit card or your smartphone if it's loaded with money in the wallet, or your smart watch to tap in and tap out of a metro or a bus. And you're charged by how long or how far you ride. I think in total, after 4 days of using the public transportation system, I spent about a total of 10 American dollars, which is super impressive. And I rode all over the island. Other big takeaways from visiting Singapore were how green it is. It's like a jungle environment, but not like a scary one, even though there's lots and lots of city around you. And I love that they've made a concerted effort to keep nature very present in their infrastructure. Also, the food is delicious. When you're buying it at a restaurant or cafe or at one of their famous hawker centers, it's pretty inexpensive, especially at the hawker centers. Obviously, there are fancy restaurants and you can spend a lot more money, but you can get really good food for really cheap. My husband, Chris, and I went to Chinatown on our first night and ate there, and it was amazing. And then my last full day/night, which was Wednesday, we went to Little India and ate there as well. And it was so good. And I literally could not finish all of the food that had been given to me. I think that our meal that night cost us about 10 Singaporean dollars, which is about $7.80 in US dollars. Also, and imagine if you've ever been to a public school where they have lunchroom trays. Imagine them putting like clean paper down and then putting your meat and huge helping of rice. And then we ordered on the side some naan because I just absolutely love naan bread. And you have all of this and vegetables. I ordered a biryani. I think it was butter chicken biryani, and it was so delicious. And it's on this tray because culturally, Indians, people from different areas, I don't know, I can't speak from every area, but they eat with their hands. Also, the people there are really friendly, helpful, and courteous, which can be a breath of fresh air because sometimes in Paris, you don't always encounter the most friendly people. I could honestly go on and gush about my time there, but let's save that for when I move there and I can really give you a settling in podcast update. I wanted to use the rest of this episode to talk about preparing to move. I know that can look different for everyone, but I'm just going to share what we as a family generally do and how that might look a little bit different this year. So jumping in, for example, last time when we moved, which was in 2022, starting in March, and we moved in July, but starting in March, every weekend that we could, Chris and I would comb through with a fine-tooth comb each room for things we didn't need or use anymore. In the bedrooms, that looked like going through our clothes to see what we might not wear anymore, looking through our nightstands for junk that may have accumulated. In my kids' rooms, that looks like me going through homemade crafts and stuff that will not survive a move and taking photos of them to commemorate them and then throwing them away. You may disagree with that choice. And I also don't do that in front of them, by the way. And that's totally fine. But that's what we do. It's fine if you disagree with me, is what I'm saying. But that's what we do because I'd rather them know we are going to commemorate this and then let them go while they're still here than having it packed up by the moving people. And then we will have tears and hysterics when we get to our destination and those things are unboxed and they're totally destroyed. And granted, we don't get rid of everything though. When you're moving around internationally, going through your kitchen and your small electronic devices or appliances is always a must because the voltage where you're going may very well be different, and most likely the actual plug that goes into the wall will look different. I have not yet had this conversation with Chris, but I definitely believe that we need to sell for a very inexpensive amount, a very small amount, all of our fans, for example, that we have used to keep cool in this apartment while we were here in France because we don't have air conditioning in our apartment. Even though the voltage is the same in Singapore, the outlets are not. And I don't think that we necessarily need to have, as a bit of a safety precaution, these little adapters on every single appliance that we own. We'll see if I get vetoed or what have you with this thought, but that's just my opinion, especially things that heat up, for example, like our toaster or things like that. But in fairness, my husband's degree is in mechanical engineering and he has studied physics and knows electrical currents better than I do. So I am definitely open to hearing how my thought process might be faulty, but that is just my original thought. Obviously, the same thing goes for a television and things like that. Having this conversation, researching these things helps you to be more prepared and to know what you need to get rid of and what you're going to want to keep. Once you've decided to get rid of things, and I know I'm talking about this as if you've never moved before, but if you're listening to this and it is your first international move, this information may be necessary. And even if it's not, sometimes I like hearing how people do things themselves to give myself a refresher or just a different perspective as to how to organize such a big transition. Anyway, when you've lived in your current location long enough, you usually know where you can donate things. Here in Paris and also when we lived in Italy, there were large bins where we could donate clothes. I actually recently found a kids consignment store. So I will be taking a lot of clothes and children's toys, or some, I shouldn't say a lot, to try to sell there. And I was super happy when the lady that works there told me that after they try to sell things for 6 months, they can donate anything that hasn't been sold to a charity, which is fantastic. Also, you can sell stuff online, of course. Facebook Marketplace can be handy. Here in France, there's multiple sites, but there's a site called Le Bon Coin, which we currently have been using to try to sell our car to no avail, unfortunately. And honestly, I really don't get it, you guys. It's a nice car. Anyway, looking within smaller communities is also a great way to sell things. At our kids' school, there is a marketplace chat where you can post things that you would like to sell or give away, and I have found that to be super helpful. Another thing we are going to have to do more so this move than we did the last time when we moved from Italy to France, and probably more so even than when we moved from the United States to Italy back in 2018, is to think about what we will be needing in the next few months or really at all. Since Singapore is just above the equator, the temperature is always in the 80s, at least in the daytime. And so they don't get snow. So those ski suits and snowsuits that we have can be sold. And they do have a rainy season, but it's pretty warm rain from my understanding. So as I think about what is going to need to be packed to take with us and what's going to need to be packed in our shipment, even though we're moving in December, I think most of our winter clothes are just going to need to be packed in the shipment and not in our suitcases. I'll keep some cold weather clothes for the week and a half that we will spend in a hotel, or 2 weeks that we'll spend here in a hotel in Paris as the apartment gets painted and ready to be turned back over to the owner. But because the kids still need something to wear. But honestly, once we get to Singapore, they certainly won't need sweaters, and maybe they can keep a few pair of pants, because ironically, I did see many people wearing pants, maybe because it's so cold inside the buildings due to the air conditioning. Maybe it's to protect them from the sun. I'm not sure. But mainly we will need shorts, and my daughter and I will want maybe dresses and skirts. And because I always have clothes for my kids to grow into, because I have so many children, well, at least I have 3 boys, I always have some clothes ahead of time that I have gotten as hand-me-downs, or I bought on sale ahead of time, or that sort of thing. And I need to kind of think about going through those containers and seeing what we should just get rid of now because we won't be able to use them in Singapore. Or maybe just keep a few things for if we decide to visit family in the winter at Christmas or something like that. Also, I have to think about possibly, if I can find them, buying some more shorts for my kids, because by the time we get to December, I know my younger boys will have grown out of some of the shorts that they were wearing this summer, and prices in Singapore tend to be a bit higher. I haven't done a ton of clothes shopping. I only window shopped a little tiny bit when I was there for those few days. I was there in September, but it would be nice to be able to get a few pairs of shorts and maybe some good sandals, because I've been told that tennis shoes really kind of start disintegrating quickly due to the heat and the humidity. Another thing, not that they won't wear tennis shoes, but it'd be nice to have a good pair of sandals. Another thing that I've been thinking about is making living in a hotel easier if we end up having to live in a hotel for a couple of months when we are in Singapore before we find and move into our permanent home. That has been our experience, especially when we first became expats and moved to Milan. We lived in a hotel for 10 weeks and it didn't have a kitchen. So every meal we either went out to eat or for breakfast, thankfully, that had been included in our room rate that we could just go down and eat breakfast there. Or we could order room service, which we didn't do often, but did sometimes when I really didn't want to drag the kids out, because we had gotten a deal of them giving us like 50% off of our order because we were there so long. So this time around, I might be packing my flat grill/griddle that I make pancakes and like things like that on. Honestly, between that and my Instapot, when we first moved into this apartment here in Paris, I used it to basically be able to have a kitchen and cook for 3 weeks, because it took 3 weeks for our range, our oven/stove to be delivered. So that might very well make itself into my suitcase if we find out that we're going to be in a hotel that doesn't have that's not like a suited kitchen, if you will, or has a suited kitchen, as well as our grocery caddy. You guys, that thing saved my life. It is like a truck. I think I probably load it down with about 100 pounds. So close to not quite 50 kilograms of groceries every time I use it. And I discovered that, and it was really my daughter's suggestion, so thanks to her, that I can fold it up small enough that it can go into a larger checked bag. Score. As time gets closer, we'll start thinking about what we want our kids to pack concerning toys as well. We obviously don't want to go to a hotel or temporary accommodation empty-handed, but we don't need to pack 2 suitcases worth of toys either. At least I don't think we do. And that's a nice part where the kids can get involved and choose some of their toys so that there are hopefully not meltdowns later on down the road. I know there are so many more things that I could mention here, but I'm kind of going to wrap it up, other than to say that one thing I pack with me, and this came from our very first move when we moved from America to Italy, because American spices can be kind of expensive to purchase, is I took a small duffel bag and packed all of my spices and like baking powder and things like that in it. And it was like a carry-on, or maybe I checked it. I can't remember. I did it again when we moved from Italy to France. Thankfully, getting spices in Italy and France is not as expensive, but I really didn't want to waste those things. But I have been told that it's important to check and see if those kind of products are allowed wherever you're going. For example, I happen to know that it is illegal in Australia to bring your spices, as they safeguard very much the ecosystem, because it's a very large island and you can't bring any spices, food that's not been obviously checked or controlled by the government, or even wood products or products that have touched wood, like Christmas ornaments, for example, due to the fact that you could be bringing pests, termites, and that sort of thing. Hopefully, I've given you plenty to think about, but also it hasn't been overwhelming. You obviously can throw all of this out with the wash and just say, I'm going to do it my way, if none of this was helpful to you. But I hope that that's not the case, and that you found some little nugget that will help you as you prepare for your next move. Now, moving on to today's Shan Select. You guys, I am super excited to tell you about this restaurant. I only just discovered it the first week of September of this year when I went on a tour of Montmartre here in Paris. Yes, one of Xenia's famous tours, with my uncle and aunt when they were here visiting us. And afterward, we were looking for a place to eat. We perused the menus of a couple of cafes, and the last one we went to looked quite good. And then their daily menu that they, have placed out on the street, written in chalk, the specials there looked amazing. So we parked ourselves at a cute little table, or tables outside, where we could do plenty of people watching, as all Parisians do. Although I feel like we got watched more than we were watching people, because it's such a cute restaurant, and commenced in enjoying an absolutely fabulous meal. The name of the place, you may wonder, is Vrai Paris, and that looks like, or is spelled VRAI, and then the word Paris afterward, which means real Paris or the real Paris. I unfortunately did not take any photos of my food, so to give you great descriptions of it, I'm not going to be able to do that. But the thing that stood out the most to me was the dessert that we shared. We had a delicious caramelized apple tart. And the apples were sliced so thinly and cooked to perfection, served with vanilla ice cream and the most succulent salted caramel drizzled on top. It was just perfect. The neighborhood was beautiful. Our server was funny and charming and very polite and friendly, and it was truly a wonderful experience. I will be sure to put the website in the show notes, and as always, I am not an affiliate, just a big fan. And now to wrap up this episode with the quote of the day. So I looked up quotes on moving, and this was the second one when I clicked on images that was listed. And when I read it, I thought, oh, wait, that's a song. But of course, I realized it was first a quote, and then it was sung or added in a song called Closing Time by the band Semisonic. Please feel free to sing along to this quote that originally came from Seneca. It goes, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Excuse my terrible scratchy voice right now, but that song is so nostalgic. It's just, I'm a Zennial, which is like not quite a millennial, but not quite Gen X. So anyway, I love that quote because beginnings are exciting, but the end of something was also a beginning at one time. And neither are bad. They're both good things. They're just a different season of the same adventure. That's it for today, everybody. If you know somebody that is moving soon, even if they're not moving international, would you please share this episode with them? And of course, if you know somebody that is becoming an expat, this would be a great episode to share with them as well. I will check in with you at the beginning of next month. And as always, this is Chandra Alley reminding you to live and travel in the know with Expatriotical.